You're looking at a panorama of the Johnson Camp on Middle Island and Lake of the Woods in northwestern Ontario, Canada. I say the Johnson Camp because it was the brainchild of my father and mother, Harry and Verna Johnson. It dates to 1951 when they purchased 2¼ acres of land from the Canadian government and then constructed a 16 by 24 cabin. You can see that cabin somewhat expanded in the trees just to the left of the boathouse. Over the years, a guest house just to the right of the boathouse and our cabin in the trees above the pump house on the left of the picture have been added. There are several other utility buildings that you can't see on the property. A somewhat amazing fact is that all, and I do mean all, of the work in the camp over the past 55 years since it was started has been done by the family. There have been many what we call projects over the years. This is the story of one which was completed during the summer of 2004. During early July in 1993, Ann and I returned from a 2-year stay in England. Our first stop was at the lake. It was exactly 20 years since we had built our 24 by 16 cabin, and we'd often thought that a dining room addition would make it much more livable. What surprised us was that we decided to build it that summer. When we got on that plane to leave England, we didn't know a construction project was in our plans. But we did build a basic 12 by 14 shell that summer, and over the years added things like hardwood flooring and pine paneling. In this picture, Ann is working at the table in the dining room. The 2 banks of 3 windows make it a very light room. Here is a rough schematic of the dining room the way it was at the beginning of the summer of 2004. The 2 doors at the bottom pass into the cabin. The right one into the bedroom, and the left one into the living room. The door at the top opens to the outside onto stone steps. The bathroom had a shower stall for our bag shower, a chemical toilet, and a small wash basin. We had a number of shelves for books and dishes. It was a pleasant room, but over the years we had identified 3 main problems with it. 1. On warmer days, the afternoon sun would beat down on the roof and make the room warmer than comfortable. 2. On cold mornings, the heat generated by our Vermont castings wood stove would take too long to penetrate into the dining room, so it was too cold for comfort. 3. The chemical toilet was too primitive to be a full-time toilet and was quite a chore to empty it every few days. After retirement, we decided to spend 5 months or so at the lake. So in 2004, it was time to solve those problems. This shows some of the changes we planned and implemented. Insulating the ceiling was straightforward, although a bit tedious. We hoped it would help keep the room cooler and easier to heat when that was necessary. A septic field is not feasible on our property, so we opted for a composting toilet. The composter requires a certain amount of space underneath the cabin, which meant moving the bathroom. That was okay since it meant we could install more windows and open up a view of the garden. A small Yodel wood stove was placed on a tile floor just in from the new windows. The piano had to be moved, making it desirable to close off the door from the bedroom. We made it into a bookcase for paperback type books. We did lose a number of shelves in the process, but found other ways to make up for that. In the pictures that follow, we will go through the various steps in this project. Up until the mid-1980s, all work at the lake was done with hand tools, with occasional help from a table saw powered by a gasoline engine. At that time, we purchased a 3,000-watt generator just to run some power tools. In 2002, we brought a good portion of the power tools from my shop and home to the lake using our one-time settler's exemption. These required more juice, hence what you see. Big Red, a 5,000-watt Honda generator. Here you see the shop with its 2 main power tools. There are many others, including those which are portable, and by laying extension cords, we can use these on site, so to speak. Every project needs materials. Even when we are building with native materials, there's always something that must be fetched from town. There are 3 building supply centers in the Kenora area, all of which stock most everything needed. When putting up a building, we have hired barges to bring out the lumber all at once. Most of the time, we use our own boats. In fact, one of the good features of Big Boat is it will easily take a 4x8 sheet of plywood. What you're looking at is our van being loaded at Home Hardware. Emily is along on this trip, making sure that things are done right. What I am loading doesn't look much like lumber. We have already been to the nursery, so we carefully pack plants and lumber together. Big boat is big enough for both. Living on an island adds a step to fetching materials. First, we load the lumber into the van at the yard. Next, we drive to where the boat is docked and park as close as possible. We then haul from the van to the boat and load once more. After parking the car, we zip out to the island where we unload the boat onto the dock. From there, it must be carried up to the building site. The dining room remodeling required several such trips for materials. The nature of the project afforded a certain degree of flexibility as to the order in which things needed to be done. We decided to start by blocking off the previously mentioned door to our bedroom. Since we still wanted access to that room, we had to cut a new door out to the living room. Our partition walls are just pine paneling boards, so cutting a new door is relatively easy. What you see is our new bedroom access looking from the living room. We found we liked it very much. The former bedroom door is now a bookcase, at least for small books. That white wall was originally an outside wall for the cabin. We painted it white because we wanted the dining room to be nice and light. The eaves and roof are still part of the dining room. That is certainly too primitive for a townhouse, but it works just fine for a cabin. The main part of our cabin has a cathedral ceiling, which is insulated and paneled with V-jointed pine boards. We decided to lower the ceiling in the dining room and use 4x8 paneling sheets that we could paint white. You can see the 2x4 ties we installed to hold insulation in panels. The long ties you see are from the original construction and will remain visible after the ceiling is finished. You can no longer get insulation backed with craft paper in the Kenora area. You can see me tucking bats of insulation between the recently installed ties. We then tacked up plastic sheets to provide a vapor barrier and temporarily at least hold up the insulation. The bats I am putting up are 6 inches thick, but towards the eaves where the panels will be tacked to the rafters we use 4-inch bats. The rafters are 2x6s, so we have the recommended air space between the roof and the insulation. Here you can see the white ceiling panels we installed. It also shows that in the middle of the room we have roughly a 10-foot ceiling, which slopes to 8 feet at the eaves. You can also see the old-style craft-backed insulation in the walls. We removed most of that because the new windows were going there. The black box I'm holding is a chimney support. More on that later. Here I am measuring toilet bowl and sink for fit in the new bathroom. That's the lower left corner in the diagram. Remodeling is always more difficult than building something completely new. In this corner I had to take down bookshelves, move a 12-volt cigarette lighter outlet, and build a platform 6 inches high for the toilet bowl. The latter because the fit was tight for the composter underneath. The toilet is a 1-pint flush, so we needed to reroute our water line to that portion of the room. The shower will go where you see the piano, and eventually a window will be installed right above my head. This picture illustrates what had to be done to install the composting unit for the new toilet. The white object in the center of the photo is the bin. It contains a composting drum that can be rotated to speed the composting process. The bin must sit on level ground, a problem for us since it's not level underneath the dining room. In fact, where the bin was to go, there was solid rock which sloped towards the foreground of the picture. We poured a cement platform which varied in thickness from 2 to 8 inches. We always gather rocks to mix in with the cement. I suppose that one might say that all our concrete piers and footings are more like masonry. At any rate, we had a level pad for the bin. The gray pipe coming out of the bin is a vent that extends upward through the eaves of the roof and another 5 or so feet beyond. It consists of 3-foot lengths of plastic pipe glued together and a cap designed to promote airflow. The waste is piped from the toilet to the bin and into the drum through an opening that is underneath the cabin. If you look carefully, you can see a line in the grass running diagonally towards the lower left corner. That marks where we buried a 1-inch plastic hose to handle any excess liquid. The hose runs to a 3-foot deep pit filled with pebbles and covered with boards and soil. A word is in order about the way the composter works. A bed of peat moss and shavings must be maintained in the drum to facilitate the composting. There is a trap door in the bin through which you add peat moss and shavings mixture twice a week. At those times you also rotate the drum. Less frequently, you reverse rotate the drum to expel composted material into a tray to be used in the flower garden. The bacteria culture that is used is of a type that does not produce methane gas. Hence, the smell associated with the process is almost nil. So far, we have been very pleased with the toilet. It takes some tending, but none of that requires heavy lifting. We were able to use most of the paneling boards from the old bathroom in the new. The louvered door is also from the old one. Inside, we reinstalled the shower stall and built a support for the wash basin. The drain lines for these had to be rerouted underneath the cabin. This shows the bathroom completely enclosed. Inside, we made a few new shelves for towels and put up a rod for a shower curtain along with various hooks for hanging things. We think we have made efficient use of a space that doesn't feel cramped. We moved next to the new wood stove. The first step is to install an insulated chimney that runs from just below the ceiling, through the roof, and then high enough outside so that the top is above the ridge. You see me with a black support box for the chimney. The box is sized to fit exactly between two rafters, so all one needs to do to support the box is to install short pieces of 2x6 between the rafters to support the other sides of the box. This framing was done before the ceiling panels were installed. When in place, the box is nailed or screwed to the supporting framing and is ready to accept the chimney pipe. The first length of pipe has a flange clapped to it, which prevents the pipe from slipping through. Most of the chimney pipe is above the roof. I never like to cut a hole in the roof that doesn't leak, but it has to be done. You also need to carefully remove a few roofing nails underneath the shingles so that the galvanized roof jack you see can slide into place. When this is done, you must put a few nails back in and goop with roofing cement like mad. It is hard not to damage shingles in the process. We use 2 lengths of pipe which snap together and then are secured with a clamp. The cap prevents rain from entering the chimney while not impeding its draft. It was high enough that we decided to install 2 wind braces, which you see me doing. The final step was to put a silicone sealant where the roof jack meets the chimney. This joint must be carefully sealed or the rain leaks in onto the stove below. It seems I always have to improve my first attempts at this. We now have a chimney. It's onto the stove. We laid the 4x4 tile floor you see as a base for the stove. If you remember, this area was the old bathroom, in which we had glued down a Congolium-type floor. It was not hard to get the old floor covering up, but the glue was a different matter. Once we had scraped off all the glue, we set the tile on the wood floor with thinset and grouted the cracks between tiles. The pipe running from the stove up to the chimney is double-walled. One length of it telescopes, so you don't have any cutting of chimney pipe to do. You're actually looking at our very first fire in the stove. With the straight-up chimney, it draws very well and heats quickly. The water in the teapot boils vigorously. With the stove installed, the next step was new windows. The windows in the original 1951 cabin are ordinary 4-light barn sash. 2 of these are sort of double hung to make for a rustic but quite attractive window. These windows were cheap and readily available in 1951. By the time we built the dining room addition in 1993, barn sash was no longer standard fare, and we had to have some specially made. Quite expensive if you can find someone to do it, but we wanted the style to be consistent. For this project, I decided to make windows in my shop. Once I had 8 ready to go, we could cut a hole for them. You can see why we wanted a view of the garden. It has really come into its own the last few years. We have inserted 2 new studs in the wall and cut off 2 that were right where the windows were to go. Eventually, we inserted a 3rd new stud right in the middle of the opening. We use these as part of the frame in which the window slides, and framing lumber for headers and sills. I admit that's pretty crude, but as long as we're willing to use various props to keep the windows open, and don't expect them to be tight enough for an Ontario winter. They work just fine, look attractive, and the cost is reasonable. Here the 4 windows are in place. The materials required for a window are glass panes, clear stock, glass points, and putty. Knowing that glass was hard to find and very expensive in Kenora, I had 30 small glass panes cut in Bloomington and managed to get them to the cabin without breaking any. I found clear Douglas fir 2x4s and 6s at McDermott's in Keewatin, which I could cut to size, and Home Hardware had the putty and glass points. The outside frame of each sash is made of cut down 2x4s joined together with biscuit joints. The thin mullions were mortised and tendoned into the frame using a radial arm saw, a plunge router, and a chisel. Each glass pane sits on a 1/4-inch strip nailed to the mullions and frame so that the resulting opening is smaller than the pane. I fashioned these out of shelf boards from the old dining room. I used my router to make a bit of cove in each one. They were then glued and nailed in. Several glass points and some putty kept each pane from falling out. As you see, each window takes 2 sashes. The top one is fixed and the bottom slides up over the top. Several pieces had to be fitted in order to keep the sash in place while still letting the window open. Another single wide window will go right behind the stovepipe. The walls around the windows must be insulated and paneling installed. Here the smaller window has been installed and paneling boards are in place. You will have to take my word for it that there is insulation behind these boards. We had to purchase a few pine paneling boards. They are the lighter ones in the picture. Over the years, sunlight will yellow varnish boards, hence the difference. The small window over the piano used to be in the bathroom, with no paneling around it or insulation. Since this window slides up into the space between the paneling and the outer wall, the insulation in that space can only be 1.5 inches thick. We used foam board, which we glued with special glue to the outer wall. We found a honey pecan stain that helped make the new paneling boards more like the mellow old ones. We then added a couple coats of urethane varnish on both windows and paneling. You can tell if you look which is the old and which is the new, but they blend in well, and in a few years it will probably be hard to tell the difference. On the outside, the windows are finished with 1x4 trim boards, and every part of the window on the outside was stained red to match the trim on the rest of the cabin. Our project is basically complete. There was a window to go in the bathroom that didn't get installed in 2004, but it's in now. There's always trim work that could be done, but isn't absolutely necessary. The project is complete. As you can see, it was a lot of work, but we accomplished our 3 objectives. The insulated ceiling keeps the room much more comfortable. The composting toilet works well for our purposes, and the little wood stove is just what is needed on a cold morning. We have no big projects planned, but who knows, someone may get an idea of how to make A Renee just a little bit better.